Okay, well, hello everyone, and thank you for participating on this first event. It's a collaboration between Newtown and Free Black Thought. We are both part of an organization called the Institute for Liberal Values (ILV), and we're all nonprofit organizations, and we have a common goal of promoting classical liberal values in different areas of our society and culture. And as for Newtown, Newtown is a cultural certification. We certify free thinking artists and institutions, and so that us consumers can easily find it. Um, Also, it gives us a chance to promote and support these people as well in a direct manner, and in the process, gives us the power to stop funding woke culture and its all its effects. Now. I invite you to, if you are an heterodox artist or institution, regardless of size, I invite you to reach out to us at any time. We'd love to chat. And if you are a citizen that's concerned with culture, has a deep passion for culture and is concerned by it, then do get in touch as well. We have other ways to get you involved. And I'm going to pass off the mic to Michael.
Hi, I'm Mike Bowen, co-founder of the Foundation for Free Black Thought, running at freeblackthought.com. And Free Black Thought is basically a way out of the box that a lot of Black Americans have experienced to say, this is the way you should think, or this is the way you should conceive of the world. And what we've done is we put together a compendium of Black authors, writers, artists, commentators that cover just about every subject that you could possibly think of, some that you might think that no Black artist or writer has commented on. And so we present a heterodox compendium for you to reference whenever you get pigeonholed. And it's part of the larger force that we're trying to assemble here to combat narrow thinking and re-emphasize our heritage in Enlightenment liberalism and civil liberty and free speech. So Free Black Thought is an asset for everyone, and we are nonpartisan. We're academics, professionals, parents, everybody who's interested in not taking one Black person's word for everything.
Yes, and just to add to that, it sort of makes sense that Newtown and Free Black Thought do this event, because if we're free to, hence the title, if we are free to think, then we are free to create. I think creators really understand that. And so I'd like to give the mic to Adam and let him introduce himself and is Wrong Speak Publishing, which he just launched recently, its mission and goals and purpose. And I invite you to submit any questions that you may have for Adam down the road. We're going to have a nice Q&A towards the end.
So first, let me thank you guys for having me on here. I really appreciate it. So my name is Adam Coleman. I'm an author of a book called Black Victim, Black Victor. You can see behind me. And I also founded the website wrongspeak.net under the name of Wrong Speak Publishing. Initially, it was for just free expression. So similar to Free Black Thought, being able to express a viewpoint that may be counter to a particular narrative, and being advocates of free speech. So initially, it was for myself because I felt like what Michael said before, kind of pigeonholed into either believing something that I really don't want to believe, or not being able to express myself, and primarily surrounding my complexion. But I'm an individual who wants to be able to express himself as free as in a free manner. So that's what had me start Wrong Speak. And since then, I wanted to invite other people to write for Wrong Speak. I'm constantly asking people if they want to express themselves, if they have an interesting story. And I publish it. I do very little editing as far as their words, and I want them to be able to express themselves. So anybody who's interested in writing for Wrong Speak, they can easily contact me. And I have very little rules when it comes to it, as long as it's intellectually sound and coming from a place of good faith, and I'm all for it.
Cool.
Yes, and so what? So Adam, what? I mean, what's the sort of behind the scene vibe here? What do writers tell you when they contact you? Did they, well, first of all, comment on the fact that you give them the opportunity, I assume, but what prompts them to do reach out and sort of in terms of, because you provide them with a place to freely express themselves. So are there any common complaints or common remarks that comes off from people who contact you?
So I would say in the beginning, it was from some people who may have seen me do interviews for my book, and I also mention wrong speak when I do my interviews. So some of them reach out to me directly and say, "Hey, I have an idea. I wanted to publish. See if I can publish this with you." I'm really quick on my emails. They say, "Yeah, please do so." Sometimes, they reach out to me, but I think they get cold feet and they're afraid to. I do respect, their want to be anonymous, but I do encourage them to use their name. But I've published articles under an anonymous or a pseudonym. But for the most part, I will say that after I do publish it and then I try to promote it for them, that they feel like a sense of relief. Like they feel somewhat validated. Like I'm not the only one who feels this way. When I show them like, hey, check out these comments, to people responding to what you had to say on Facebook, it really makes them feel good, because I think, especially having the lockdowns and COVID and everything, if we feel even more isolated, I know I did. It's part of the reason why I started the website in the first place. And having an avenue to express something that doesn't appear to be on the news or on television or movies or anything like that, to just say it and have some sort of validation behind it to make sure that you're not crazy. I think it's really therapeutic for people. I think that's the best word to use, therapeutic. And they want to do it some more. So I've been able to get some repeat people. I invite it. And the goal is to try to maintain 2 to 3 articles a week. I prefer quality over quantity. So yeah, 2 to 3 articles a week. I contribute as well. And but I think I answered your question.
That's great. That's great. So tell me a little bit about your background. Where are you from? How did you get to where you are? What are some of the things that made you think, I can do this and it needs to be done?
All right. So, I'm a product of a single family, single parent. Grew up with my mom. I didn't really have a relationship with my father. So I think a lot of my story, what I talk about in the book, comes from that place of neglect from my father and a difficult childhood, being homeless a couple times while I was a kid, being homeless for a short period of time as an adult, and having financial struggles, personal struggles, manhood struggles, just adult struggles in general. And finally coming to a place of trying to figure that out, all while being a father at a relatively young age. I had my son when I was 21. So, having to figure all these things out and kind of put it all together to a point where I feel completely secure of myself. And I wanted to use my story within the book to show people that, you don't have to be a victim to your circumstance. Not everybody's born into the most ideal situations. And there are people who had it way worse than I did. But the point is that once you become an adult, there are certain capabilities that you do have and you have to take control. And also from a place of faith, I do believe that God gives us strength to overcome certain situations, or at least to withstand it to a point, as long as you believe that you can overcome it. So, for me, success isn't necessarily becoming a millionaire. It's becoming a sustainable and respectable adult. And that's, I think, what most people really want throughout their life. So, to get to the point that I am at today, I had to struggle, and I wouldn't change anything. I think it made me a better person, a more appreciative person. I don't really take anything for granted. I'm very happy with simple things. Um, and what actually you asked what brought me to the book. Um, I started waking up politically. I was politically inclined from a left wing perspective. However, um, I was very neglectful to understand the other side, right? I was being fed information from a left wing perspective on a consistent basis, even about the right wing. And I wasn't just being factual, I wasn't doing the extra steps. I was taking everything that was fed to me as gospel, so to speak. And I had quite a few red pills, accidental exposures to other thinking, and not only just exposure to it, but just like good faith, good faith conversations with people on an accidental basis to kind of like make me question myself. And what was funny is that in my personal life, I question all types of stuff. Um, you know, I question, why should I dress this way? Why should I act this way? What does it mean to be black? I had all these questions before, but I never saw myself do it in a very political manner. I was fed information. I took that information and I reasoned with that information to come to a conclusion, but I had half of the equation, and I didn't go any further. Um, so yeah, I quite a few red pills to kind of wake me up as to both perspectives. What makes the most sense now that I have the complete information to kind of go by? So, politically, I'm independent because I want a balance in my life. I don't arbitrarily trust either side of the political spectrum, although I will admit that I don't really like the Democrat Party. And, I have some skepticisms about the Republican Party, but I think that's fine. I think that's normal. I think most people should be that way. And I think blind loyalty to a particular party just leads them to failure.
And you've mentioned a couple of red pills earlier. Was there? Do you recall any moment that maybe some years ago, or maybe you read something, maybe you saw a film, whatever it is, what is it that sort of inspired you and sort of puts you on that path here of sort of opening up your mind and discovering this sort of new world, so to speak?
Yeah. So I talk about it in the book, actually. I'm saying this not to brag anybody listening, but I started doing some traveling a number of years ago, and I started kind of bouncing around Europe, meeting different people from different countries. And I went to Madrid, and I was just looking for a random pub to go to watch some soccer games. I'm a big Chelsea fan. So the game was over, and I was about to leave, and it was beautiful out, and then all of a sudden, just torrential downpour. I don't have anything with me, so I said, "There's more games on. I might as well stay." And there was a Manchester City game on, and I just sat next to this couple, and one guy's name's Louis, and we just started talking. We started talking about comedy and stuff like that. And I'm really good with like keeping in touch with people, so we exchanged information, and we would talk routinely about football and life and stuff like that. And we got into the topic one day of Brexit. And he indicated that he was for Brexit. And I said, I thought Brexit was for like these, racist white people in England. And I asked him, was like, why are you for Brexit? And he said, almost verbatim, the United States would never allow for an outside governing body to tell it what to do. And I was like, that makes so much sense. All right. And from him, a white, and just to kind of put in perspective, the reason he was for Brexit is because he is English. He was living in Spain, but he is English. And, for an Englishman to be the first person to tell me about Thomas Sowell, and actually buy his book and read it. And it made so much sense. It was very clear about things that I'm seeing around me, but I couldn't put my finger on. Um, and on top of that, listening to Joe Rogan podcasts. I can't remember his name right now, but there's a libertarian business owner. I keep forgetting his name, but he was saying some stuff about the 2008 crash. And I started watching his videos. I was like, God, this makes so much more sense than what it was told to me. Like, just logically speaking, how he was breaking it down. And it made me really just question a ton of stuff that I used to believe. But then I asked, why did I believe this? Where was my source? And my source was MSNBC or CNN. And that's as far as it went. And I feel like I'm a relatively intelligent person, but I trusted my sources far too often, and I didn't question things like I needed to. So that's why today I'm obsessed with questions. I'm obsessed with questioning things, and that's why I like the opening intro to the book is called Questions, and I ask a variety of questions to kind of set the stage for the rest of the book. But I think asking questions and being skeptical is a good thing to do. I tell my son that. I say, you can question anybody, including me. If I can't give you an answer as to why I'm telling you something, that should tell you something's off. So you should be able to question things throughout life.
As you grew, which clearly sounds like you grew, I hear a lot of confidence, and it makes me feel like you weren't just that you were really fixing yourself, that you were trying to improve yourself and become a better person. And that's kind of different than people who grab onto a political bandwagon and then start spouting off. Was there a moment when you said, hey, I'm more free than I thought I was? And you just said, hey, I'm kind of this new person.
I would say when I started writing this book. Kind of like to be even clear about it, one of the reasons I started writing the book was the reaction to George Floyd. And, I never thought it would turn into what it turned into. But I saw it was a lot heavier than, let's say, previous police encounters with Black people or anything. It seemed far heavier. And then I'm watching the worldwide impact and reaction. And I think in combination with the lockdowns, I think it is what made it like multiply. And at first, I remember being kind of afraid to even really talk about it publicly. I don't really post much on social media, or at least at the time. And I just didn't really say anything. But as time went on, I started looking for free speech platforms. And I met people who were like-minded, who were intellectual, and they made sense. And I felt like, man, okay, I'm not the only one who feels this way. And I had been wanting to write a book for a while, but I just didn't know what to write about. And then it just hit me one day. And especially after people were giving me encouragement to write. And they had no idea that I wanted to write a book. So they were just seeing me write posts and stuff like that and explain myself. And they gave me the encouragement. And I think from that encouragement and just starting to write and starting to look at certain things, and, I was driven to finish the book. It took me about 9 months. But I knew as time was getting closer, I knew what it was going to be. I knew that I was going to be potentially sitting in front of people like yourself, speaking in an open platform, speaking how I feel and not being apologetic about it, because I'm coming from a good place. I know I'm speaking either based off of facts or based off of pure opinion. But, I want to feel allowed to speak recklessly, right? Whereas before I was afraid to. I was afraid to question certain things publicly because I know what happens when you as a Black person question aspects of Black culture, or question why this is the case, or question, did George Floyd contribute to part of his death? These are uncomfortable things to say in general, and they're even more uncomfortable to say as a Black person because of a variety of reasons. But I knew that I guess the best way of saying it, I knew that I would regret not doing it. And I wanted to, part of the reason I wanted to write the book also, I wanted to be a good influence for my son. I wanted to be able to write this so he can understand his father and understand that, what he had to go through and the complexities behind it and the complexity of society and culture, and understand my perspective. And I want him to have the strength to say it if he wants to speak openly, speak recklessly, sometimes be wrong and be perfectly fine with that, but not to be afraid of strangers who want to criticize you. Because once you start letting strangers, chastise you and let that bother you, then you're giving them your power. And I got tired of that. I got tired of people silencing me. I got tired of the media speaking for me. I got tired of relinquishing my power, my control to other people. So yeah, the level of confidence that you see today was months in the making, because I knew I had to prepare myself. I even speaking with my now wife, but at the time she was my girlfriend, and asking her, like, are you okay with this? Because what if this goes public? Are you okay with any sort of backlash? You're going to be with me. Is this fine? And she always encouraged me. And now we're married today, and she knows what it is, and she's proud of me for sticking to how I feel, speaking openly, speaking intellectually about certain things, and being myself.
And sort of segue now, once you've released your book, what was the special moment that you've decided, hey, you clearly have the entrepreneurial spirit, right? Because when that's what we do, entrepreneurs, we launch stuff, right? But is that something that you've discovered that's like, hey, maybe there's a book but it needs more, and then you started developing your entrepreneurial skill? Or was it just, what was your thought process here going from the book to Wrong Speak Publishing?
Well, actually, I started Wrong Speak before the book was released. I started writing the book, I want to say August of 2020. And I think I started Wrong Speak somewhere around October, somewhere around there, September, October. So I was occasionally writing on Wrong Speak. And then I actually took a big hiatus because I really wanted to focus on the book. So there was a little bit of going back and forth. But I want to say that once the book came out, I really was able to have the time and double down on writing, not only for Wrong Speak, but now writing for Scoon and all these, any other publications I can get. But I think, did I answer your question? I'm not 100%
Oh yeah.
sure.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Have you been surprised by the reaction to people that come and write for Wrong Speak?
Am I surprised by people wanting to write, or?
Yeah, generally. I mean, when you discovered kind of like that Sting song, "Message in a Bottle," there's all kinds of people like me. Was that really? Did you expect it? Did you expect to be criticized, or how did you deal with that when it first started off?
To be honest with you, I think for most of this, whether it be the book or the website, I just had no expectations. I went into everything hoping for the best and, expecting nothing. So anytime some stranger who wants to write and express themselves, I'm always appreciative. I would say one of the happier moments when someone publishing is actually someone who follows me on Twitter, but then I saw them reply to a comment and they kind of indicated that they work for big tech. So I was like, huh. And I reached out to them and I started communicating with them. And I said, would you be willing to write? And they're like, well, I don't really write. And, and I got on the phone with them, explained what the process would be. Like, I just wanted them to be able to express themselves because I know that they have a story and something to say. A couple of drafts, and we were able to publish what it's like for her to work in big tech, and under a pseudonym because she doesn't want any sort of backlash. But I've had people react to like, wow, I thought it was bad, but it's actually worse than we thought it was, but for certain people, for the people who read it, they would have never heard her story if it wasn't for that. She would have just kept it to herself and moved about life and just dealt with it. But she feels so much better being able to just get it out there. Because when I approached her, she was like, oh, hell yeah, I've been wanting to like get it out, but I didn't know how to. I got to hide myself and I got to do all these things. So, promising to respect her identity, I wanted to help her to do that. So that's one of my more proud articles to put out for someone.
And if your son seems fairly old, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Was there because you mentioned earlier that one of the reasons you wrote your book was for your son, right? So that he can understand his father and his beliefs and whatnot. And what does your son tell you about sort of the social and cultural vibe that's going on, for instance, in his school or with his friends, or is this something, and what happened once you released a book and once he read it, and did that have an impact on him, or and maybe his group of friends as well?
I'm not sure about the group of friends per se, possibly, but I will say with him, he just turned 16 October 1st, and I'll admit he is taller than me. So he's a big kid. I can't pretend that he's shorter than me anymore. But he was able to read the book, and he was proud of me. And even so, like I gave him some copies of the book to give to certain people, like his teacher who was interested. So these are like proud things for him. But as far as how he started viewing things, he wasn't really like culturally attuned or anything like that. But I would say probably around the time I started writing the book, during lockdowns and stuff, I would just play videos and just, see what he thinks. And I remember we would watch Ben Shapiro just ripping apart leftists, and we would just laugh, right? And we were laughing because Ben Shapiro is extremely logical. My son's logical, and it just makes sense to him, right? He's not overly emotional. We're both pretty stoic. He's even more stoic than I am. So it's something where he operates from the aspect of like, does that make sense? That's kind of how he operates. I don't really have to tell him like vote for this or be like this or anything like that. We're just two people who try to apply logic to things that we see. So as far as politics go or culture, he just tries to make sense of things. And just to add, my son's biracial. His mother is white. So for him, he is just kind of like, I am me, right? He doesn't like to be put in that position where he has to choose a particular side. In the book, I actually talked to someone who is biracial and what it was like for her to have to be rejected from two sides of the spectrum when she was growing up because she's not completely this and not completely that. And so for my son, I've always accepted him for that. His name is Daniel. And I remember years ago, I asked him, do you see yourself as black or white? He says, I just see myself as Daniel. I was like, all right. So that's pretty much my son in a nutshell.
You mentioned being red pilled. Do you think there have been changes in your media diet, and especially in terms of cultural things that maybe you accepted before, like Black cultural portrayals of Black folks on TV or in movies, that now is kind of received in a different way?
Yeah, so I started consuming a lot of YouTube, a lot of independent independent creators, whether it be news related, culture related, but just things that were different and things that made you think about, whether it be culture, relationships, things of that nature. It's funny because I started consuming more relationship stuff, especially around the time I got with my now wife, and we would watch different types of relationship things and ask questions that we never thought about before. And then we would sit down and talk for hours about what we were just watching. We'd pause the video to sit there and just start talking about it. And it was like a slow red pill for both of us. Talking about, does the, let's say, traditional way of moving about life and relationships work better than the more modern way of 50-50? And just having these particular discussions. And it kind of came to a point where, for myself, I was red pilled in all different types of areas and consuming all different types of media. And it was for that very reason, because I think whether it be culturally, relationship, politically, I needed to expand what I was taking in. And then once I take in all this information, I need to make sense of all of it. So, I would watch certain commentators for a period of time, then I would stop watching them. I'd watch somebody else because I'm trying to take it all in. And I know that this creator, 50% of what they're telling me is useful, and the other 50% may be hyperbolic and exaggerated. And that's fine, because I can at least take away that 50% that is useful and then move on. So it was just constantly expanding the information in comparison to what I used to do maybe a handful of years ago, which was turn on a particular channel, watch show after show after show, which would talk about the same things and have basically the same narrative and the same outcome. And that was my information source, and believing on top of that what they're telling me was 100% true. That's where it's interesting with the whole Kyle Rittenhouse situation, is because watching independent sources and watching video footage for myself without a filter, and then turning on the mainstream news where I know they're blatantly lying and they're gaslighting the American public, it just solidifies why I don't trust them anymore. Where I have a sliver of trust when it comes to, I'm highly skeptical of corporate media, whether it be on the left or the right, just to add. Excuse me.
And going back to Wrong Speak Publishing, you're starting to surround yourself with writers. What would you say is the proportion of them that write under a pen name, don't reveal their face because, is there any talk about, fear of being canceled? I mean, you sort of touched on that a little with the lady who wrote about big tech. So is that a big component of your daily lives now when you get in touch with writers?
I want to say that most people, I don't know, I can't really put a percentage on it, but most of the people are willing to use their name and show their face. I've had some people who were leaning on it. I was like, listen, I'm showing my face. I think you can show your face. It's okay. And they're like, you know what? You're right. And they just go ahead and do it, and it's fine. But there are certain situations where I completely understand. So the big tech one, I had a teacher as well, and these are professions where it's very touchy for them to do that. There are other professions where I think people maybe are seeing the world around them, and they're just being very sensitive to the possibility that they could be targeted or canceled, which is, to be honest, very unlikely. But what happens is we hear the horror stories, and the horror stories sound like they're happening all the time. So as far as proportionality, most of the people are willing to use their name and their face. Only, I want to say there's only maybe been a few that have been adamant about using a pseudonym.
Well, that's good, because you're it's sort of, people are ready, right? When they contact you, it means they're ready, right? They've done their their thought process. They've made peace with whatever friends they may lose, right, or whatever it is, and they're just ready to express themselves, right. And you and your initiative, prompts them to just take the plunge, right.
Right.
So I think that's great.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm just a guy. A year ago or over a year ago, I was just a dude, just working a regular job. So for me to take the plunge and talk about it and show people that it's not as scary as you think, the water's not as deep as you think it is. So I want people to be encouraged to show their face, use their name, and express themselves. And I think for the most part, as long as you express yourself in a thoughtful manner, why would someone try to cancel you? Right? Are there topics that are more sensitive than others? Sure. Are they worth doxing over? Usually people are trying to dox people who are relatively known. Someone who's never written before, who's a complete amateur coming to me, the chances of them getting doxed is extremely unlikely. What would be the motivation behind it? And even for myself, it's extremely unlikely because I'm not really that controversial. I'm just expressing myself, and I'm doing it in a very thoughtful manner, and I'm talking about very particular things. And I'm usually very careful with my words because I don't want them to be misconstrued. So, the whole worrying about the identity and being canceled, like you said, if they're willing to reach out to me, most of the time they're ready to kind of put themselves out there.
Cool. I too am in the IT business.
I see. You got Dell servers back there?
Yeah, I have a few and some Intel NUCs.
I got some too.
That would you say that there's something about the industry in particular that helped you have faith in the logic and in your words and in your desire to be precise?
That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure. I think it's the other way around. I think most people who get into IT are usually more logically sound, right? So that I think that's what attracts them to IT is because, this works this way. And then, if you're troubleshooting something, you're trying to use a very logically sound way of finding where the problem's coming from. So, like, for example, I'm on the, like the system administration side. So if there's a problem, I have to deduce, okay, is this the only problem? Where the other things are coming from? I have to use very good troubleshooting skills and a set of logic to kind of break it down. And I think for me, that's just a normal way of how I think. And so when I actually took the time to really think about culture and think about the rest of the world, I'm doing it in a very logical manner. So when someone reads my book, they're literally just reading how I think, right? And so that I think the people who have actually read it and gave me their feedback about it, it's very understandable because I'm not speaking in academic talk. Mm-hmm. I'm not using, huge complicated words. I'm writing well, but I'm explaining myself in a very logical manner. Mm-hmm. And it's very laced. It's laced in a way that it's easy to understand. And I'm using a lot of storytelling as well. So it makes it enjoyable to read.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I would editorialize just a moment because I think, especially if you're an administrator, mm-hmm. You know that every system has flaws.
Yeah.
Every system has bugs. And you see it as a challenge to go out and fix those bugs. Mm-hmm. And that's contrasted to people think there's the science out there that has the answer. And people don't understand that you have to kind of put yourself out there and be willing to be wrong and then just come back and correct your errors.
Yeah. Like I said, speak recklessly. Sometimes you're wrong. But I think for myself, I'm always willing to admit that I'm wrong. I've talked to people. It's funny because there are certain people who think that you're going to argue with them and then you're like, yeah, I agree with you. It's like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, you're right. And then, because I'm always willing to be wrong. I've had that happen quite a few times, and I don't think they catch on that I'm agreeing with them, because they're looking for a fight. But I'm not married to being right. I'm more wanting to find the truth of the matter, and find something that makes the most sense. So.
And for Wrong Speak Publishing, are there what's the future plans for it? Where do you see it growing in the next few years? And do you have any plans to include fiction, and something that's more cultural rather than information wise, so to speak?
I want to get to the point where I'm helping other people write books themselves. Especially if it's semi-controversial. So I want to get them to the point of completing like how I did and publishing under the Wrong Speak label, and continue to put out articles, and just encouraging people to speak out. Yeah, I want to say I have a couple of people who have expressed interest in writing a book. But a lot of people express interest in writing a book. It's just a matter of, are you willing to do it? And, how much of my help do you need? And so on and so forth. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the next few months, there's a project that I start taking on, where I'm helping someone get to the point of, or start working towards completion with their book.
So there's a bit of a mentoring aspect to Wrong Speak as well then?
Yeah.
And any plans on veering into fiction, into novels? Say, is that something that would interest you, that you have in your plans? Maybe not now, but mid to long term.
Honestly, I don't think so. I think for a lot of people, discussing culture is really important, and kind of being head on with it. There are different ways you can discuss culture in fiction, obviously, but I think being head on with it and being able to express yourself, it has to be kind of like in a nonfiction manner, I think, for a lot of people. So I have some people who want to tell their story, because it's difficult to actually do that. It's difficult to kind of open up and be very vulnerable. And it's a little bit easier to kind of hide certain things within characters and things like that. So, and on top of that, fiction is not really my thing. I don't know if I'd be a good mentor when it comes to fiction, but I think with nonfiction, and working towards that particular process and that particular genre, I think I'd be good.
Cool.
Well, if we don't mind, there you go. We have a question, so we're kind of switching to Q&A now. And as you can see here, Mars is asking, how has the Black community absorbed your work? Have they been generally supportive?
Well, for one, I'm not very famous, at least not as of yet. I don't know. I was going to say something, but the objective isn't necessarily to be famous or anything like that, or even to make a ton of money. The objective is to affect culture in some way. The Black people who have read it, who have contacted me, generally understand where I'm coming from and appreciate it. Now, if maybe they were people who were already sort of there, but they appreciate how I explain things, and it maybe made them think about certain topics that they never really thought about before. So there are times where I'm like combining things that don't really seem like stuff that you would combine. So one of the chapters is fatherhood and feminism. Really two things that you don't really think would go together, but there's a reason why I'm doing it. And because I'm contrasting how they affect each other ultimately. So I think there are certain chapters and certain things that really touch people, and other Black people as well. But I like I said, it's still relatively unknown. the book itself, but the people who have read it, regardless of race, they've all appreciated. They've all felt some sort of connection to it. And just to add, the way I wrote the book, it was not necessarily for any particular group, right? So if you're someone who is white and you want to understand certain aspects of Black American culture, at least from my perspective, then it helps to make sense of certain things that you may be seeing that no one is really willing to either explain or talk about. If you're Black, there may be things that I'm talking about where you're like, wow, I never really saw it that way. There are contradictions surrounding me, and I never really understood it in that particular manner. You know, even throughout the process of writing my book, I mentioned my wife before. You know, my wife is a former Democrat, and you know, as I'm writing stuff and I'm showing her things and we're discussing things, I slowly red pilled her. You know, so I think it really helps when you have good faith within the book, which in the beginning of the book, I'm establishing good faith with the reader, that they understand exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm not chastising Black people. As a matter of fact, I'm attacking ideas. I'm not even attacking people. I'm attacking the concepts and the ideas that we believe in, the ideology, right? I'm really talking about people themselves, unless they're very specific people, like if they're LeBron James or Oprah or something like that. But for the most part, I'm talking about the ideologies and that we subscribe to. And if we aren't subscribing to, what we allow by not criticizing these particular ideologies. So obviously not every Black person is a BLM supporter going out on the streets and doing all types of crazy stuff. But there are a number of Black people who are unwilling to challenge it because they are Black. You know, they're unwilling to kind of question, is this something that's helpful? Is this something that's good? So, you know, I'm attacking all those particular ideas.
Okay, so from Anon, we have Adam Coleman. I learned from you that Blacks didn't commit as much crime relative to non-Blacks in the 1920s as in the case in 2021. For example, 21% of people arrested in 1926 were Blacks versus 44% in 1986. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, they're referencing. So basically, what I was doing in the book was saying I was challenging the idea of black imprisonment is somehow a legacy of slavery, right? And I think what happens a lot of times, what people do to make particular arguments is that they literally skip over post-slavery and all the way to the 1960s, right? As if that era didn't really exist other than to kind of talk about Jim Crow, which is bad, right? But other than that, they don't examine any of that. We don't talk about the nuclear family during that time period. We don't talk about the increased literacy rate coming from not being able to learn how to read and write, and the spike in literacy post-slavery. But what they're talking about is if today's increase in imprisonment for Black Americans is a legacy of slavery, then why in the 1920s was it proportionate to the population, or relatively so, right? If we had Jim Crow and we had, you know, this open market on racism and unfair treatment to Black people, wouldn't that be the time to just arbitrarily lock them up because, you know, a legacy of slavery? We're more imprisoned percentage-wise than then, yet we were more oppressed then. You know, so I'm challenging the notion, like, how does that make sense? Where if you talk about the family and the breakdown of the family and the increase in single parenthood, and I go into detail as to how that matters, because I don't think a lot of conservatives do it in a good way. They just say the breakdown of the family and just kind of keep it moving. So I wanted to use that as an example. If you look at 1986 versus 1926, we had Jim Crow, we had all these different things, and then you look at 1986, 20 years post the Civil Rights Act. Yet we're more incarcerated. And that was in the 80s. So, why is that the case? Is it really a legacy of slavery, or are there other things that are coming into play? So I'm making more so the argument that family and culture changed, and that is why imprisonment increased.
Yeah, and I can see the influence from Thomas Sowell, because he's been speaking about these issues for years, if not decades, right?
Yeah, but I think the difference, let's say the difference between myself and Thomas Sowell, and this is not to say like I'm better than Thomas Sowell or anything like that, but we're obviously different. We're different people. He is explaining things in a logical but a more academic manner that maybe not everybody is willing to ingest. I'm speaking about it from a very personal and emotional standpoint. I'm giving you my life story mixed in to using logic. So I'm actually taking advantage of the emotionality so people can understand on a deeper level as to why I'm saying what I'm saying. And I'm not just, what they might perceive as some bookworm who went to college and has hypothesized this. And so I'm going to tell you, a layman's, what the real answer is. No, I'm coming from a very personal standpoint as to coming from a broken family and the vulnerability that I had as a kid. And, I just to kind of tell you, I was born in Detroit in the 1980s, right? And we left Detroit at the age of 5. And I've asked my mom this, and I've asked myself this, and other people. It's like, what if my mom never left Detroit, right? I could have easily gotten mixed up with that stuff. I know myself as a kid. I was vulnerable, without a doubt. But we left, and we went to more rural areas, and we went out of state. And there are kids who have to live in that particular situation and get caught up in all these different activities. So yeah, being vulnerable, not having your father around, I think that makes a huge difference, and especially with the increase number-wise in single-parent homes. You're just increasing the number of kids who are vulnerable.
Yes, and Sheena, there you go. So Sheena is asking, what is the value of higher education from your own perspective?
Sheena is cheating because that was my question to her. What is the value of higher education? In my opinion, there is value to it as long as it's a particular type of pathway. I think the old days of saying just go to college and get something to make it look impressive when you go in the job market are over, right? Because access to higher education is a lot easier than it was before. It was more exclusive. So yeah, it's going to look impressive. Just making up numbers, if let's say 12% of the population had a college degree, yeah, that sounds pretty exclusive. But if it goes up to 25, it's not nearly as exclusive, right? So you have to get something that fulfills the particular market. The only unfair part that I see is the cost related to it. So yeah, if you want to become a social worker because you want to work with people, you think you can help people, and becoming a social worker lends you to make $50,000 a year, does it make sense to make $80,000 in debt to fulfill that, right? Obviously, that's not everywhere or anything. I'm just making up a scenario, but it's a real situation. Does it make sense to incur all these costs, for these particular degrees? And then on top of that, what degree are you going for? So I think it really depends. I think what is more apt to say when it comes to higher education, and just so people know, I didn't go to college. I went to tech school. So I actually didn't come out with the same amount of debt that other people did, but I was able to do the same job as people who did go to college. You got a 4-year degree and a ton of debt. So, working in the tech field, I started seeing that, started questioning, the whole aspect of going to college. Is it useful? I think if you're able to learn a particular skill set, then yeah, it's worth going to college. Are there trade schools that you can do just perfectly fine? Absolutely. Does it does it make sense to incur $60,000 to $80,000 worth of debt to get some sort of dance degree, right? Right, and that might be
liberal arts degree, right?
right, like a liberal arts degree, and that's fine. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. But understand and don't be disappointed when the market doesn't reward you for that. When there is a very little market for someone with a bachelor's degree in whatever liberal arts or social sciences program that you're going for. And I think what's happening is the generation of kids who were going to college and with these high hopes of coming out and starting at making $50,000, $60,000 a year and told to just get whatever they can get, they're utterly disappointed, they're bitter, and they're in debt. And I think it's an unfair proposition to tell every kid to go to college just because. When I was traveling, I met other college students and I was like, how old are you? And they're like, oh, I'm 25, 26, right? Because the way they do it, they go for a semester here and there, they travel, they do like Erasmus where they study abroad, they do all these different things. And for them, and also they take apprenticeships. That's actually pretty common, where if they have an idea that they want to work in a field, they take an apprenticeship to kind of get used to it or to see like, this is not for me. So they don't invest any more time in it. We force kids to go straight into college, saying, hey, you're 18 years old. What do you want to do for the rest of your life? And they have to pick something, right? And so what's the first thing they do? Well, I'm interested in this. And some kids get lucky. For myself, I was interested in technology. So I went in that direction and I didn't feel comfortable enough going to college. That's the main reason why I didn't go. So, but what if I was interested in, psychology, let's just say, for example, there are a ton of people who go to school for psychology. And yes, it's a field that you can make some sort of career out of, but a lot of them don't have a plan. Or how exactly would you? Listen, someone works at my company. She's a receptionist with a bachelor's in psychology. Like, obviously, not everybody has a particular plan when they're going in. They're just interested in certain things and they're going to school for it. So I think higher education it's a hit and miss. Like most things, there's no guarantee with it. So, but the cost of going to college and not being correct on what you're choosing is detrimental. So, I think that's my only concern when it comes to higher education. If it was cheaper, then I would be like, yeah, go for these classes if you're interested in it. But being that it is so expensive in this country, it's unfair to tell a kid to incur so much debt just because.
All right, so I'll let Michael wrap.
Yeah, and I think you're a good example of someone who's demonstrated the fact that you can learn things after college.
Yeah.
Things that are not obvious that you ultimately have to work through yourself. I really want to thank you for sharing your story with us. And I wish you all the success in your book. You've demonstrated the confidence of someone who has looked life square in the eye and dealt with it realistically, with an open mind and a good spirit. And I'm encouraged that you are trying to continue that on for other people through Wrong Speak. And amen for more diversity, Black diversity of ideas. So really thank you. I'm glad you've worked things out for yourself with some self-mastery that has definitely helped your son. And looks like you have like a great, I wish I could watch the same YouTube as my wife.
Yeah.
But you're making it work and you're fearless. Bravo to you, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Yes, and thank you to our host, the Institute for Liberal Values. And if you out there are appreciate our mission, whether it's collectively or individually, you're more than welcome to support us through the ilv.org, ilvvalues.org website.
And thank you guys for having me on. I really
thank you so much,
it.
Adam. Really appreciate it. Yeah.